Hello, welcome back. My name is Rabbi Finn. We've had Focaccia bites, we've had Shemot snacks, we've had Braai for variety, but for this sefer, for this book of Bamidbar, we are taking it to a new level. We are doing Bamidbar Braai. Yes, you heard me correctly, Bamidbar Braai. Every week I'm going to share with you a dish that you can enjoy at your braai, at your barbecue. Some of it will be done outside on my barbecue, but when I recorded this yesterday, it was completely pouring down. So we are doing an amazing focaccia. It is brilliant. It is a wonderful way to start off any braai, any barbecue meal. And it's got a perfect link to this week's Sedra. So stay tuned and learn how to make my amazing focaccia. Okay, so to make your focaccia, you need to start off with a bowl, which you're going to be mixing everything in. You want to add 325 grams of flour. I'm using strong white flour. If you've only got plain flour at home, it should probably also work as well. So 315 to 325 grams of flour. This is probably enough for 4 to 5 people to enjoy a really good slice of focaccia. Or if you're serving this as part of like a starter, probably enough for actually 10 people. I think I've done it before. Into there, you want to add in 2 good sized teaspoons of instant yeast. So 1, 2. That wasn't a really good size, so let's make that a 2 and a bit. And about a teaspoon of honey. You need that little bit of sweetness in there because that is what's going to help activate the yeast. Now, at this point, I like to give the bowl a little bit of a shake just to make sure that the yeast is all in with the flour before I add the next couple of ingredients. The first is going to be about a teaspoon of salt, and about half a teaspoon of garlic powder. Going to add just a little bit of a garlic flavour to it. Now, this is quite important for focaccia. Focaccia's got to be quite an oily bread. So you want to add 1/4 of a cup of olive oil. So just a good glug of olive oil in there. Now, I've not added 1/4 of a cup of this oil because I've got a special oil here which I make where I roast some garlic and then I put the cloves into the oil. And so I'm just going to add a bit of that oil in just to add another bit of a subtle roasted garlic flavour. If you don't want to make this kind of oil, it's absolutely fine. Maybe just put a little bit more garlic granules in. Give that a little bit of a shake. And now you want to add in about 215-ish millilitres of warm water. It's going to be quite a sticky dough. So do it though, I would say probably put 2/3 to 3/4 of the water in and start mixing it together till it forms a bit of a dough. And as I'm doing that, I'm just going to use the dough hook because it's going to knead in the machine. But just to mix it together, as I do that, let me tell you about the 2 parshiot that we've missed so far. So we're in a brand new book, Bamidbar. So we've had Bamidbar and Nassar. Nassar was the longest parsha in the entire Torah. Perhaps the theme that we can take away from the beginning of the book of Bamidbar is numbers. As we know, Bamidbar has that English name of numbers, and that's because it starts off with a census of the Jewish people. God commands Moses to count the Jewish people, which always leads to the very obvious question, which is that, you know, God, who is all-knowing, all-powerful, everywhere, omnipresent, omnipotent, should know exactly how many people there are in the Jewish nation at that time. So why does he command Moses to count? Surely he could just give over the name, the number to Moses. And the simplest answer, or the nicest answer, the one that I certainly like to take away at this time of year, is that actually the whole purpose of the count was not to find out how many people there were as part of a Jewish nation, but actually to emphasize the individuality of every member of the Jewish people. Because they've been traveling together as this large unit, and in such a large unit, it's quite easy to be subsumed by the blob, to feel like you don't have anything to add. You're just part of something bigger, but you are not there yourself contributing. And the whole point of counting was Su'u et Rosh Bnei Israel, to literally lift up the heads of the Jewish people, to make them feel, each and every one of them, that they were something of value, something of importance. The purpose of the count was to accentuate the individuality within the community. because community only works if it is a community of individuals coming together to do something better than they could if they were on their own. But it requires that moment of individuality. So just because we're part of a community doesn't mean that we lose our value as individuals. And so that is the message that God was trying to impart to the Jewish people at this time, that as they were preparing to enter the land of Israel, they shouldn't forget that actually, whilst they are part of a big people and community is so important, their individual contribution was just as, if not more important, because there's no point being part of a community if you do not bring your individual talents to that community. And that is something that certainly we launched the book of Bamidbar really supposed to meditate on, this idea that we, each and every one of us, are special, unique, and have something to contribute. Now, the dough is ready to knead. I want to knead it in my machine for about 5 minutes. I'm then going to cover it with some cling film and leave it to rise for a good hour or 2 hours, depending on how hot your room is, till it's doubled in size. And then I'll show you the next steps and explain why actually focaccia is the perfect dish for this week's portion. So we are now getting ready to make the actual focaccia. The bread, the dough has risen. Look, it has risen by double at least. And now is the time to make it into a focaccia. For me to also tell you about this week's Torah portion, because this week is the Torah portion of Baalotach, and it really marks a changing point in the Jewish trajectory, Jewish history. This is the point where, if we're honest, things start to go a little bit downhill for that first generation of the Exodus. If you look in this week's Torah portion, you'll see an inverted nun, two inverted nuns, which surround a very, very, very famous passage by Kibin Aaron by Yomer Moshe, when the Aaron, the Ark of the Covenant, used to travel. And before this, everything is fine. After this, things start to go wrong. The Jewish people start complaining. The first complaint is they remember what they used to eat in Egypt, and if you go all the way back to Shemot snacks, and the very first one, you will remember that there they had, cucumber and fish and all those lovely things, and they're complaining that all they've got is manna. But it's also here that we are told what manna is and what is the ingredients for manna. And let me read you what manna is according to the Torah. Now, manna was like coriander seed, and its colour was like the colour of badolach. The people would stroll and gather it and grind it in a mill and pound it in a mortar and cook it in a pot and make it into cakes that tasted like dough kneaded with oil. And I was trying to think to myself, what is dough kneaded with oil? The first thing that came to my mind was donuts. But that's not really, that's dough cooked in oil. What's dough kneaded in oil? You got it. Focaccia, because that's literally what we did. We put quite a lot of oil in, and the next stage is really to knead it and to let it rise again in the oil. So, stage one, get a tray which you're going to bake it in. Make sure you spray some oil in, and then now get a nice olive oil, and you just want to literally, liberally, on the pan, spread some olive oil. This is going to add flavour, so use a nice olive oil if you have it. The next bit is going to be a little bit yucky. It's not going to be nice to feel, which is why I'm going to actually use a dough scraper. You want to knock down your dough. Knock it back. And then try and get your dough into your tray. It's very, very stretchy, this dough. And it's going to be quite a soft dough. Get it into the tray, and then with your hands, flop it around in the oil so it's all covered in that lovely oil, and then just try and stretch it out across the tray. I'm using a rectangular tray. It's probably about, 13 centimetres by about 20-25 centimetres. Use whatever tray you have. It works in a 9x9 tray as well. The main thing, though, is that you need to have got your... got it really well oiled. Now, at this point, you're going to let it rise again for about 20 minutes, and it will hopefully fill up this tray a bit. You want to turn the oven on to 220 degrees Celsius. That's on a fan oven. Yes, I know it's high, but that's what you want to do. So leave this for about 20 minutes. Hopefully it should puff up a bit. We've got one more thing to do to this dough before we cook it, and I'll show you that stage in about 20 minutes time. So it's been 20 minutes. Let me just show you. This has now puffed up really, really nicely. There's one more step we need to do before we are ready to put this in the oven. Step one, get a finger. Make sure it's clean, obviously. And just poke holes into to your dough in sporadic places. In places you might need to be a bit tough with it, but you want to create those dimples which are synonymous with a good focaccia. Once you've done that, get some more oil. Go for good quality olive oil and just sprinkle it all over the top. And let it rest into those little dimples. Finally, get some herbs. If you don't have fresh herbs, you can use some dry herbs. But I've got some herbs which I'm growing in my garden. So I've got some thyme and some rosemary. And I'm just going to literally shred the leaves and just sprinkle them all over. So there goes my thyme. This makes the smell absolutely amazing. And then let's get some rosemary in here. And you just want it all over. If you want to make it look artistic, you can make it look artistic. If you want to put other vegetables on, you can. Yeah, a bit of like a fried aubergine would be stunning on here. Some courgettes, some dried tomatoes, olives, whatever you like. I'm keeping it simple, classic herbs and garlic, which is already in the dough. And then the final step, a few more herbs. The final step, let's get those last herbs in. The final step is get a bit of rock salt. You don't want too much, and just give it a little sprinkle over the top so that you get those little bits of like saltiness when you bite into it. I personally love that little saltiness. If you're not a fan of salt, don't put it on, but that's it. Now, what you want to do is take this and put it in your oven for 15 to 20 minutes and then it'll be perfect. I'll see you once it's cooked. So it's been 15 minutes, it has come out of the oven. Whilst it is still hot, get your olive oil and just do a final dash of olive oil. Remember, this is supposed to be dough that has been kneaded or cooked with oil. So, you know, do it properly. Just a little bit of olive oil just to give it a final yumminess to it. And that olive oil is going to seep into the dough as it cools down. And there it is. Let me just show you. My thyme and rosemary focaccia, make it for this week. Use it as your way to remember the manna in the desert and this week's parsha of the Halotacha. I hope you have a great week and have a great Shabbos. Bye.